Hey everyone, today I want to talk about how the hoods work on first and second generation Dodge Vipers. One of the attributes of this car was the clamshell style hood. It really gives the car a nice appearance, especially when the hood is up and displaying the engine. But having a hood like this, it does require a lot more care in adjusting it if you want to have it perfect. A typical car like my Cobra R has a standard style hood where it just has two hinges on the back and then it has the single clamping point on the front. With Vipers, they're a lot different because the hood is so large and because of the clamshell, it does require a lot more contact points, and keeping the hood perfectly aligned means you have to keep all those contact points kind of dialed in, and it can be a little bit difficult over time. They will tend to move a little bit. If you do look at a lot of Vipers, and especially the hood alignment, you will often notice that this seam here and then the one on the opposite side, a lot of times they're not perfectly symmetrical to each other. Mine is off by a tiny bit, not much, but if you do notice that they're off on a car, it's not necessarily indicative that the car has been apart or heavily damaged. They do just tend to move a little bit over time because there are so many contact points under the hood. So I'll just go over all the different contact points and how this hood actually works, because it has more than one range of motion unlike most hoods. With all Vipers, you have your external latch under here. You pull it down, and then the safety catch stops it. I believe this is a federally mandated thing. Pretty much all hoods have this, where you have to move a secondary lever to get it to come up. That's what this little cutout here is for, just so a little bit more room for your hand in there. So you kind of have to take the preload off of it, and then it comes up a little bit more. If you notice, when the hood comes up, it doesn't just come up, it also comes forward. This gap here just got considerably bigger. I'll put it back down just to show, because again, this is not just up and down, it's also a little bit forward and back. So I'll push it back down right to the secondary. And now the gap got a lot smaller, so it does come forward as it comes up. So I'll put the hood back up. Now the hood is completely unlatched and it's just riding now. It's sitting on the rollers on the top, and the catches on the bottom are starting to come out. So you want to lift it from the center. To bring it up. Now, this is where this hood gets a little bit interesting underneath. Like I said, this hood's not hard to take off because there's actually only 4 bolts that hold it on. You have 1, 2, and then 2 on the opposite side. So if you unbolt those 4, the whole hood comes off, and you can easily put it somewhere else, but like I said, it's probably pretty heavy. I've never taken this one off, and I never plan to. So I do see a lot of owners that modify these things. They'll put these things on some sort of rack, or just to get them off the ground so they don't damage them. But there are a lot more, like I said, contact points under here. Each side you have a little set of rollers on the top. You have this piece on the bottom, this plastic piece. This rests in a catch on the bottom. And then you have your support bar. That's one basically big piece that has like wound springs on it. And then on the front is where it actually grabs onto. You have the hinges, both 2 on the front you have. These are adjustable, these hinges. This is why if the hood ever rides high, they basically have slots for the screws that they fit in, and you can drop it down a little bit. This is the only one that has the secondary lever on it as the safety release. It doesn't have one on the other side. And then over there is the sensor for the hood latch for the security system. Getting back into what I said about a lot of points of contact. Technically, there are 6 points when the hood is in the closed position. Obviously, when it's up now, none of them are being used. These are the metal brackets on the front that grab the actual lasps. These are the only 2 lasps that actually hold it shut. Everything else just rests in place. So these are actually what hold the hood physically down. So these are important, making sure they're well lubricated, clean, the bolts are tight, and making sure that it's properly adjusted. So you have one set of springs down, wound springs down here. This helps hold the whole mechanism up. It takes the weight of it. And then these will hold the hood at a certain angle when it's closed. So when you're bringing the hood down, the first thing that engages are these rollers. These rollers mate to this slot. This whole mechanism is also on bolts that are slotted, so this whole thing is adjustable, so you have to make sure this is tight as well. Those rollers will go into here, and then right before, as it goes into the secondary, they roll forward, and then they lock into here. This is why it's important to have them adjusted, where if one's more forward or up than the other one, you'll see these gaps will be a little bit off. So when they come down and lock in, at that point, this piece mates in to here. So when the hood is in the closed position and fully locked, the two clamps at the front are holding it. This piece is laying in this catch, which is also adjustable in and out. And then the roller has gone into here, and it's basically sitting all the way back on here. So this is why there are so many Vipers with hoods that are sort of misaligned. It's not necessarily anything that the owner's done wrong. It's just over time there are so many bolts and so much of this is adjustable that things will just rattle around and move a little bit over time, especially with how much vibration you can get from this car, especially with the rough suspension and whatnot. So it is, like with anything, it is important to keep these adjusted correctly. If they're not and the different mating surfaces are hitting each other, you can start to cause, rub damage, paint damage, and even potentially start to crack parts of the hood. So it's very important to keep these things adjusted. A lot of people kind of don't understand how complex these hoods actually are and also why they're so expensive. This is part of the reason. So I just wanted to cover this. For anyone also looking at Vipers, if the hood's a little misaligned, don't necessarily panic that there's something underlying issue with the car that's been wrecked or whatnot. It is a big trial and error thing as far as sort of dialing it in. When I got my car, the front was a little bit high, so I loosened the bolts on both of the clamps on the front, and I dropped them down just a hair. It's a lot of trial and error. You just got to take it slow, a little bit at a time, and I dialed it in, and now it sits nice and flat in the front. But if you don't get it to 100%, you might have, like on my front part here, this side, when it's closed, is a little bit smaller of a gap in the far side. It's almost impossible to get them absolutely perfect just because there's so many different things that need to be moved. So if you want to try to tackle it and try to make it perfect, that's something that would be up to you. But I'll start bringing the hood back down. I'll see if I can show exactly where everything starts to kind of jump into place. You can see that starting to line up with that. The rollers start going in. See, the roller falls into the slot on there. So the roller's in the slot on here. It's a little dark, but that's sort of forward a little bit. Just like before, the hood both goes down and back a little bit. This gets a little bit closer. It's not perfectly level, but it will be once the hood's shut. And the piece in there has made it up together. Usually when you close it, since they both have the latch at the same time, you usually don't hear two definitive different clicks, but you do just want to test it once the hood is shut. Just give it a gentle tug under here. You can usually tell the gap should be pretty tight. It tends to be a little bit wider here, the gap. That's just the way the car's set up. So usually, if you want, you can just give it a push if you don't think it's all the way down, just to make sure. And then everything should, once again, be lined up. All your gaps should be pretty close to being symmetrical if the hood's adjusted properly. Like I said, it's almost impossible to get every single gap exactly the same and perfect, but that's just the way this car is designed. So that's how the hoods work on first and second generation Vipers. I think it's a much nicer look than they did with some of the later cars, and then they sort of went back to this with the 5th gen cars. But it's definitely a unique attribute of the car, and if you own one of these, that's one thing that people constantly say when you have these at car shows with the hood up, is how cool it looks with the clamshell style hood. So I hope this video was very informative. Thanks for watching.